My mother stood by her new husband. He moved into my grandfather's house, erasing every trace of our past. They thought I'd stay silent, but they forgot one thing. I was the only one holding the legal keys, and in that tense courtroom, I turned desperation into victory. But before we get there, you need to understand how everything spiraled into chaos. It started the day Richard walked through that craftsman door, measuring the place like he already owned it. My name is Madeline Carter, Maddie to everyone who knows me, and at 34, I thought I'd already faced my share of family drama. I work as a software engineer at Vertex Innovations in Portland, debugging code and building systems that actually follow logic, unlike the mess my family would become. But nothing in my ordered world of algorithms prepared me for the chaos that erupted after Grandpa Henry died. Grandpa wasn't just any grandfather. Henry Carter was a master craftsman, a legend in restoration circles who could breathe life back into the most damaged historic homes. His hands, weathered and scarred from decades of work, had built something extraordinary, a 1920s craftsman-style mansion that stood like a jewel on Laurelhurst Avenue. Every beam, every carved detail, every piece of stained glass had been either restored or crafted by him personally over 40 years. The house wasn't just property. It was his autobiography written in wood and stone. I spent every summer there as a kid, learning to use a hand plane in his workshop while other kids were at camp. He'd tell me stories about each room, how he'd salvaged the oak banister from a demolished theater, how he'd spent 3 months perfecting the built-in bookshelf joints. "This house has soul, Maddie," he'd say, running his palm along the smooth wood grain. "Someday, it'll need someone who understands that, someone who won't just see dollar signs." When pancreatic cancer took him last spring, I discovered he'd meant those words literally. His will, meticulously drafted with our family lawyer Samuel Reed, left the house to me. Not to my mother Patricia, his only child, but directly to me. The document explained his reasoning in his typical straightforward manner. To my granddaughter Madeline, who alone shares my reverence for craftsmanship and history, may she preserve what I've built with the same love I've poured into every nail. Mom took it hard, first losing her father, then what she saw as a rejection from beyond the grave. I tried to comfort her, explaining that Grandpa probably thought she'd sell it, which, knowing Mom's practical nature and her condo lifestyle, wasn't entirely wrong. She seemed to accept it eventually, throwing herself into grief counseling at her church. That's where she met Richard Hale. Richard appeared in our lives 6 weeks after the funeral, introduced as a fellow widower from Mom's support group. He was 61, silver-haired, with the kind of aggressive charm that made him successful in medical device sales. He laughed too loud, dominated conversations, and somehow made Mom giggle like a teenager. I wanted to be happy for her. God knows she deserved companionship after Dad died 15 years ago. But something about Richard set off every alarm in my programmer's brain. He had 2 adult children who orbited him like satellites. Connor, 31, was a CrossFit instructor who talked about crushing it and beast mode without irony. Sophie, 28, called herself an influencer, which seemed to mean she posted photos of acai bowls and complained about life's unfairness to her 12,000 followers. Neither had steady careers. Both lived in expensive apartments downtown, and Richard bankrolled it all while complaining about kids these days to anyone who'd listen. Within 3 months, Mom was spending every night at Richard's downtown high-rise. Within 4, she was hinting about taking the next step, and by month 6, barely 8 months after Grandpa's death, she announced their engagement with a rock so large it looked like costume jewelry. "I know it seems fast," she said over coffee, twisting the ring self-consciously, "but when you're our age, you don't waste time. Richard makes me feel alive again." I forced a smile and said the right things. Even as unease pooled in my stomach, Mom was a retired school principal with a generous pension and no debt. Richard's lifestyle didn't quite match his supposed success. The leased Mercedes, the rental apartment, the constant cash flow to his kids, but Mom was glowing in a way I hadn't seen in years. Then came the bombshell. Richard and I have decided to move into Dad's house. I mean, your house, Mom corrected herself quickly. Just temporarily, while we figure out our living situation. You don't mind, do you? It's so big. And you're hardly ever there with your work schedule. The request hit me like a sucker punch. Grandpa's house sat empty most weeks while I stayed at my Pearl District apartment, closer to work, but it was my sanctuary, my connection to him, every weekend. I'd drive over to maintain the gardens, oil the wood, check the 50-year-old boiler that needed coaxing like a temperamental cat. Just for a few months, Mom pressed, reading my hesitation. Richard's lease is up, and the housing market is crazy right now. We'll be like caretakers. Looking at her hopeful face, I couldn't say no. Mom had lost so much. Her father, her husband, and in some ways, her daughter who'd buried herself in work rather than dealing with grief. If Richard made her happy, if living in that house brought her comfort, how could I refuse? Okay, I said finally, but it's temporary, and no changes to the house. She hugged me tight, promising nothing would change. She lied. The changes started small. I arrived one Saturday morning in July to find a contractor's van in the driveway. Richard met me at the door, all smiles and casual authority, like he'd been living there for years instead of 3 weeks. Maddie, perfect timing. We're just updating some of the flooring. That old hardwood was becoming a safety hazard. Patricia nearly tripped yesterday. I pushed past him to find 2 men ripping up the original Douglas fir planks in the hallway, boards Grandpa had spent months restoring by hand. Stop! Just stop right now! The contractors looked between Richard and me, confused. Richard's smile tightened. Maddie, let's discuss this rationally. These floors are 90 years old. Exactly, they're original to the house. They're supposed to be here. My voice shook with rage. I said no changes. Vinyl plank is much more practical, Richard continued, as if I hadn't spoken. Waterproof, scratch-resistant. You'll thank me when it comes time to sell. I'm not selling, ever. He laughed, actually laughed, and patted my shoulder like I was a child. You don't understand property values, sweetheart. This place could be worth twice as much with some modernization. Mom appeared from the kitchen, her face tight with embarrassment. Maddie, don't make a scene. Richard's just trying to help. Help? He's destroying... I stopped, seeing Connor and Sophie on the living room couch, watching the drama with poorly hidden smirks. Sophie had her phone out, probably recording. The contractors are already paid, Richard said smoothly. Might as well let them finish. I wanted to scream, to physically throw them all out. Instead, I called Samuel Reed from the front porch, my hands trembling. He listened, sighed, and reminded me that as the legal owner, I could stop any modifications. But evicting family members who'd been invited to stay was complicated. Send them a formal written notice that no changes can be made without your written permission, he advised. Document everything. I did. Richard ignored it. Over the next 2 months, I watched in horror as they systematically dismantled Grandpa's legacy. The stained glass windows in the dining room, each panel a different Oregon wildflower that Grandpa had commissioned from a local artist, were replaced with energy-efficient clear glass. So much brighter now, Mom chirped, not meeting my eyes. Connor claimed the workshop as his personal gym, hauling in equipment that scraped the floors. When I protested, he flexed unnecessarily and said, Your grandpa would want the space used, not sitting there collecting dust. He'd want it used for woodworking, for creating things. I'm creating myself, Connor replied without irony, building the ultimate machine. The beautiful built-in bookshelf in the library, each shelf custom-fitted, the wood grain matched perfectly, was torn out for a more open concept. Sophie turned Grandpa's study into her content creation studio, painting the warm burgundy walls white and installing ring lights that she left on constantly. Every weekend became a battle. I'd arrived to find new improvements, the copper gutters replaced with vinyl, the original doorknobs swapped for smart locks, the garden Grandpa had cultivated for decades paved over for low-maintenance landscaping. You should be grateful, Richard said during one confrontation. "We're putting thousands into this place." "I never asked you to. This is my house." His face darkened, the mask slipping. "Your house that we're maintaining. Do you have any idea what property taxes cost? Insurance? That ancient boiler needs constant repairs. If you want to make all the decisions, then you can start paying all the bills." It was a trap, and we both knew it. My salary was good, but not enough to cover the house expenses plus my apartment and student loans. Grandpa had left me the house, but not much cash. Most of his money had gone to medical bills and Mom's inheritance. Mom took Richard's side every time. "You're being unreasonable. Maddie, they're just trying to make it livable." It was livable. It was perfect. Perfect for when? 1925? Times change, sweetheart. You need to let go of the past. But the past was all I had left of Grandpa. Every change felt like an erasure, like they were deleting him piece by piece. I started documenting everything obsessively: photos, receipts, contractor names. Sophie mocked me for it on her Instagram stories. My boyfriend's stepsister is having a breakdown over some old wood. #hoarder vibes. #get therapy. The breaking point came in September. Richard had been pushing to add himself to the deed. For insurance purposes, he claimed. When I refused, he got creative. I arrived one Saturday to find him meeting with a real estate attorney in my grandfather's study. "Just exploring options," he said when I confronted him. "Did you know about adverse possession laws? Fascinating stuff. If someone openly inhabits and improves a property for long enough—" "You're threatening me in my own house?" "Our house," he corrected. "Your mother and I are married now. Community property laws are complex, and with all the improvements we've made, documented and paid for." He spread his hands, letting the threat hang. That night, I called Samuel again. His voice was grim. "He's building a case, the improvements, the bills he's paying, establishing residency. He's planning to claim equity in the property, maybe even force a sale." "Can he do that?" "Not easily, but he can make your life hell trying." I sat in my apartment, staring at photos of the house from before. Warm wood, stained glass catching afternoon light. Grandpa's workshop with tools hung precisely where he'd placed them, all of it being stripped away by strangers who saw only dollar signs where I saw love. The October morning that finally broke me started with a text from Sophie. "OMG, you're going to love what we did with the backyard." Transformation. Tuesday, now out with the old. I drove over immediately, my stomach in knots. The 40-year-old oak bookshelf that Grandpa had built as his masterwork, each joint fitted without a single nail. The wood grain flowing like water across its surface, lay in pieces on the front lawn. A cardboard sign read, "Free Old Furniture." I couldn't breathe. That bookshelf had been in the parlor, holding first editions Grandpa had collected over decades, photo albums of our family history, his woodworking journals where he'd sketched every project. Now it was garbage, its shelves warped from morning dew. "Oh, you're here." Connor emerged from the house, protein shake in hand. We needed space for the entertainment center. That thing was depressing as fuck. "Where are the books? The albums?" He shrugged. "Donated them? Or maybe trash? I don't know. Sophie handled it." I ran inside, my vision blurring. The parlor was unrecognizable. White walls, a massive TV mounted where the bookshelf had stood, gaming consoles and speakers everywhere. But it was the kitchen that stopped my heart. The doorframe, our doorframe. Every year on my birthday, Grandpa would stand me against that frame, mark my height with a pencil, then carefully carve the line with his pocket knife. Maddie, 4 years, 3 feet 2 inches. Maddie, 10 years, 4 feet 8 inches. Maddie, 18, 5 feet 6 inches, headed to college. The last one, just before I left for Oregon State. Now it was painted pristine white, every mark, every carved number, every memory, gone under layers of primer and semi-gloss. Clean, right? Richard's voice behind me. That old wood was so marked up, looked terrible. I turned slowly. He was smiling, but his eyes were cold, calculating. He knew exactly what he'd done. Those were my height marks, from when I was a child. Were they? Must have looked like random scratches to the painters. His smile widened. You really should have mentioned if something was important to you. Everything in this house is important to me. Then maybe you should have been living here instead of leaving it to rot. Mom entered, her face hard. Richard's right. Maddie, you can't expect us to live in a museum. I expect you to respect Grandpa's memory. Dad's dead. Mom's voice cracked. He's gone. Maddie, keeping this place like some shrine won't bring him back. Richard's trying to make it a home for the living, not the dead. By destroying everything Grandpa built? By modernizing, by making it comfortable. God, you're so selfish. Everything has to be your way. About your memories, your inheritance. What about me? I'm his daughter. I lived with his obsession with this house my whole life, always second to his projects. Now I finally have someone who puts me first. And you want to ruin that too? The pain in her voice was real, but so was mine. Mom, I'm not trying to... You are. You're jealous that I'm happy, that I have Richard and you have... What? Your computer? Your empty apartment? Your weekend visits to commune with ghosts? Richard put his arm around her, protective and possessive. Patricia's right. You need help. Maddie, this obsession isn't healthy. Sophie appeared, phone already recording. Are you seriously crying over paint? Oh my God, this is so going viral. Tech Karen has meltdown over home makeover. I left. What else could I do? But sitting in my apartment that night, something crystallized. They'd made a mistake in their eagerness to erase Grandpa. They'd revealed their true intentions. This wasn't about making a home. It was about taking one. I called Samuel. I want them out. That's complicated. Your mother is a tenant by your invitation. Then I'm revoking it. Formal eviction notice. Whatever it takes. Richard will fight. He's been establishing residency, making improvements. Destruction. He's been destroying a historic home, and I have documentation of all of it. There was a pause. He filed something with the courthouse yesterday, a claim of equitable interest based on substantial improvements and financial investment. My blood went cold. He's trying to steal my house. He's trying to force you to buy him out or sell. Maddie, this is going to get ugly and expensive. I thought of the door frame, painted white, the bookshelf in pieces, the stained glass replaced with empty clarity. It already is ugly, but I'm not giving up. That weekend, I didn't go to the house. Instead, I went to Grandpa's grave, laying flowers on the simple granite stone. I'm sorry I let them in, I whispered. I'm sorry I didn't protect it better, but I'm going to fight now. I promise. Monday morning, I did 3 things. First, I hired Samuel officially, putting down a retainer that emptied half my savings. Second, I installed security cameras at the house, perfectly legal since I was the owner. And third, I posted my own social media update, tagging local historical preservation groups. Watch as developers destroy a 1920s craftsman masterpiece for profit. Every piece being demolished was handcrafted by master restorer Henry Carter. Richard's response was swift. A letter from his lawyer arrived at my office, claiming I was harassing his family and interfering with their quiet enjoyment of their residence. It demanded I cease all documentation and pay for half of the improvements made, nearly $40,000. But I'd learned something from watching Richard operate. He was a bully who expected submission. What he didn't expect was a fight. The battle for Grandpa's house had officially begun. Samuel Reed's office hadn't changed since Grandpa first brought me here at 16 to witness his will signing. The same leather chairs, the same wall of law books, the same smell of coffee and old paper, but now I sat across from him as a client, not a granddaughter tagging along. Richard's playing a dangerous game, Samuel said, spreading documents across his desk. But he's playing it smart. Every receipt, every contractor invoice, every improvement, he's documented it all. They're not improvements. He destroyed historical elements worth 10 times what he spent. I agree, but proving that in court requires expert testimony, historical appraisers, restoration specialists. That's expensive. Maddie. How expensive? Including legal fees? You're looking at 30 to 50,000, maybe more if he drags it out. My stomach dropped. I don't have that. I know. Samuel removed his glasses, cleaned them slowly. Your grandfather was my friend for 30 years. I drafted his will precisely to prevent this situation. But Richard found the loophole, your mother's invitation. So what do I do? We have the law on our side. The deed is in your name alone, transferred through probate. Richard has no legal claim to ownership, but he held up a finger. He can claim equitable interest. He can argue that his investments, made in good faith, entitle him to compensation. Good faith? He's deliberately destroying the house to force a sale. Proving malicious intent is difficult. To a judge, it might look like a family dispute over decorating choices. Samuel pulled out a yellow legal pad. But we have advantages. First, the documentation you've been collecting. Second, the historical significance of the house. And third, he smiled slightly, Richard's greed. He's overplaying his hand. Over the next week, Samuel and I built our counterattack. I contacted the Oregon Historical Society, who sent an assessor to document the damage. Her report was damning. Over $200,000 in historical value destroyed, including irreplaceable handcrafted elements that represented significant examples of 1920s craftsmanship. I also discovered something interesting in the public records. Richard's medical device company had filed for bankruptcy 2 years ago. His Mercedes was 3 months behind on payments. The downtown apartment was in eviction proceedings. He wasn't a successful businessman. He was a con artist running out of options. Follow the money, Samuel advised. Where did he get $40,000 for renovations? The answer came from Mom's credit card statements, which she'd carelessly left in the house during my last visit. 3 cards maxed out, 2 new loans in her name. Richard wasn't investing his money. He was spending hers. Armed with this information, I confronted Mom one last time. She was alone in the house, Richard at another business meeting. He's using you, I said simply, showing her the bankruptcy filing. He's drowning in debt, and he's pulling you down with him. Her face went white, then red. You're lying. You'd say anything to break us up. It's public record. Mom, look. I showed her the eviction notice for his apartment, dated a week before he moved in with her. He didn't choose to live here. He had nowhere else to go. Stop it. The loan's in your name. I said stop. She stood, shaking. Even if it's true, so what? He loves me. We're building a life together. He's building a lawsuit to steal my house. Your house, she laughed bitterly. Always your house. Dad couldn't even leave me his own home. Had to skip a generation. Make sure precious Maddie got everything. That's not... Isn't it? You were always his favorite, his little apprentice, his heir. And me? I was just the daughter who didn't care enough about wood grain and joint angles. The pain in her voice cut deep. Mom, Grandpa loved you. He loved you more. Tears ran down her face. And now you want to take away the one person who puts me first? He doesn't put you first, he's using you. At least he sees me. At least he needs me. She wiped her eyes, smearing mascara. Get out, Maddie. Get out and don't come back until you're ready to accept my husband. I left, but not defeated. That afternoon, I filed the formal eviction notice. 30 days to vacate. Samuel also filed an injunction to prevent any further modifications to the property. Richard's response was swift and vicious. By evening, Sophie had posted a video titled, "Psycho Stepsister Tries to Make My Dad Homeless." It went viral in Portland's social media circles. My company email filled with messages from people who'd seen it, calling me heartless, greedy, evil. Connor left a voicemail. You fucked with the wrong family. We're going to bury you in legal fees until you beg us to take that shithole off your hands. But Richard made one crucial mistake. In his anger, he'd filed his equity claim too early. before establishing full residency requirements. Samuel pounced on the technicality. He needs 6 months of continuous residency to claim equity under Oregon law. He's only been there 4 months. We can fast-track this. The probate court agreed to an expedited hearing. 3 weeks. Richard hired Melissa Thorne, known for aggressive litigation and dubious ethics. She immediately filed a countersuit for harassment, emotional distress, and defamation. "They're trying to bury us in paper," Samuel explained. "Make it too expensive for you to continue." "Let them try," I said, though my savings were nearly gone. The local historical preservation community had seen Sophie's videos and my documentation. They rallied, setting up a GoFundMe. Save the Carter Craftsman. Within a week, we'd raised $12,000. The Portland Tribune ran a story. Historic home becomes battlefield in family feud. Richard made another mistake. He kept destroying things. Despite the injunction, he removed the original copper pipes, selling them to a scrapyard. The security cameras caught everything. Samuel amended our filing to include criminal destruction of property. "He's desperate," Samuel said. "Desperate people make mistakes." He was right. A week before the hearing, I received an anonymous email with an attachment. Richard's text messages to someone named Derek, discussing the Portland score and how much we can squeeze from the old lady before moving on. Richard wasn't just a con artist. This was his pattern. The week before the hearing, Richard unleashed his full manipulation campaign. Mom called every relative we had, spinning a tale of her ungrateful daughter who chose property over people. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, calling me heartless. Aunt Diana, Mom's sister in Seattle, left a particularly harsh voicemail. "Your grandfather would be ashamed. Choosing money over your mother's happiness? You've become everything he stood against." The irony burned. I was fighting specifically to preserve everything Grandpa stood for. Richard orchestrated the narrative perfectly. At church, he and Mom played the wounded couple, persecuted by a materialistic daughter. Mom's friend Linda confronted me at the grocery store. "Patricia gave you life, and this is how you repay her? Throwing her onto the street? She's not being thrown anywhere. She chose..." "Save it. We all know what you are now." Sophie's social media campaign intensified. She posted old family photos she'd found in the house, pictures of me as a child with Mom, carefully cropped to exclude Grandpa. Look at how happy they were before greed poisoned everything. My stepdad just wanted to give Patricia a beautiful home. Family first, greed kills. The comments were brutal. People who didn't know me, didn't know the situation, piled on with righteous fury. My LinkedIn started getting messages. Someone contacted my employer, claiming I was demonstrating values inconsistent with Vertex Innovations' commitment to community. Emily, my best friend and coworker, found me crying in the parking garage. "This is insane. Can't people see what's really happening?" "Richard's better at this than me," I admitted. "He knows how to play victim." "So fight back, show them the truth." But the truth was complicated, nuanced. Richard's lies were simple, emotional. Which one do people prefer to believe? The Portland Tribune reporter, Janet Reeves, called asking for my side. I almost declined, but Samuel encouraged me. Public opinion matters. Judges are human. The resulting article included photos of the destroyed bookshelf, the painted-over door frame, the receipts showing Mom's maxed credit cards. But Richard countered immediately with his own interview, claiming I'd manipulated the images, that he'd only made necessary safety improvements, that I was mentally unstable from grief. 3 days before the hearing, something shifted. Mom showed up at my apartment at midnight, soaked from rain, mascara streaming down her face. "He's been texting someone named Valerie," she said, collapsing on my couch. "Planning their next move in Bend. He called me a depleted asset." I wanted to say, "I told you so." Instead, I made her tea and let her cry. "I gave him everything," she whispered. "My savings, my reputation, my relationship with you. We can fix this. Mom?" She shook her head. He's already got my power of attorney. Changed it when I was on Ambien after a procedure. I found paperwork for a reverse mortgage on the house. My house. The condo Dad left me. Mom, no. He's going to testify that you're unstable, that I'm afraid of you. He recorded me saying things, edited them to sound worse. She pulled out her phone, played a recording. Her voice, but chopped and rearranged. Maddie is obsessed, dangerous. I'm afraid. That's completely fabricated. The judge won't know that. Richard's lawyer, that Thorne woman, she specializes in this, making victims look like aggressors. Mom grabbed my hands. I'm so sorry, baby. I was so stupid. Will you testify, tell the truth? Fear flickered in her eyes. He'll destroy me. The reverse mortgage, the credit cards. He'll leave me with nothing. You'll have nothing anyway when he's done. She pulled away. I need to think. The next morning, Richard called me directly. Your mother visited you last night. Stalking now? Protecting my interests. Here's my offer. Drop the eviction. Give me $50,000 for the improvements. I'll leave quietly. No. Then I'll bury you. Your mother will testify that you've been unstable since Henry died. Sophie has videos of your episodes. Connor will describe your threatening behavior. By the time Melissa's done, you'll look like a danger to society. None of that's true. Truth is what the judge believes, and judges believe heartbroken mothers over bitter daughters. We'll see. He laughed. You really don't get it. I've done this before, 3 times. I know exactly how to play this system. You're an amateur going against a professional. Maybe, but I have something you don't. What's that? Nothing left to lose. The historical preservation community organized a protest outside the courthouse for the hearing day. Save the Carter Craftsman signs everywhere. The Oregon Historical Society submitted an amicus brief about the house's significance. But Richard had his own crowd. Mom's church friends. People Sophie had rallied online, all painting me as the villain who valued property over family. The battle lines were drawn. Tomorrow, we'd find out who the judge would believe. Samuel squeezed my shoulder as we reviewed documents one last time. Whatever happens, your grandfather would be proud. You're fighting for what matters. I thought of Grandpa's hands, patient and steady, teaching me to read wood grain. Integrity isn't about the easy fights. Maddie, he'd said. It's about standing firm when everyone says you're wrong. Tomorrow would test just how firm I could stand. The probate courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with worn wooden benches and fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly ill. Judge Catherine Morgan presided, mid-60s, steel-gray hair, eyes that missed nothing. Samuel had said she was fair but tough, with no patience for theatrics. Richard entered like he owned the place, designer suit sharp, Patricia on his arm. Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. Connor and Sophie flanked them, Connor in an ill-fitting blazer. Sophie dressed like she was going to a cocktail party. Melissa Thorne, Richard's lawyer, looked like a shark in Prada. Your Honor, Thorne began, this is a simple case of a daughter's grief manifesting as irrational possessiveness. My client and his wife have invested considerable resources improving a deteriorating property, only to face harassment and illegal eviction. She painted Richard as a savior, a successful businessman who'd rescued a widow from loneliness, only to be attacked by her mentally unstable daughter. The improvements became necessary repairs. The destroyed craftsmanship became removal of safety hazards. Miss Carter has exhibited a pattern of erratic behavior, Thorne continued, clicking through Sophie's carefully edited videos on a laptop. Here she is screaming at my client. Here she is trespassing after being asked to leave. Here she is making threatening gestures toward Mr. Hale's son. Each video was cut to remove context, not showing Richard goading me, not showing them destroying Grandpa's work, not showing Connor blocking my path to my own door. Furthermore, Thorne produced documents. Mrs. Patricia Hale will testify that she fears her daughter's escalating aggression. Mom shifted in her seat but said nothing. Samuel stood slowly. Your Honor, may I present evidence of what actually occurred? He was methodical, devastating. First, the probate documents, ironclad proof of my sole ownership, then the Historical Society's assessment, with before and after photos that made the judge's eyes narrow. This stained glass window, Samuel pointed to a projection, was created by renowned artist Marcus Bellingham in 1924. It was worth approximately $70,000. Here it is in a dumpster. Gasps from the Historical Society supporters in the gallery. This bookshelf represented 400 hours of master craftsman Henry Carter's work. Here it is, destroyed, on the lawn. Richard's jaw tightened. But most telling, Samuel continued, is this? He produced the security footage of Richard removing copper pipes after the injunction. Mr. Heir knowingly violated a court order. He sold historical elements for scrap metal, $3,000 worth, which he pocketed. That's taken out of context, Richard started. Mr. Heir, you'll have your turn, Judge Morgan said coldly. Samuel presented Richard's bankruptcy documents, his eviction notices, the text messages about the Portland score. With each piece of evidence, Richard's confident mask slipped further. Your Honor, Samuel concluded, Mr. Heir isn't a victim. He's a predator who targets vulnerable widows, destroys their assets, and moves on. Ms. Carter isn't acting from grief. She's protecting her legitimate property from a con artist. Thorne jumped up. Objection. That's character assassination without proof. I have proof, a voice said from the gallery. Everyone turned. A woman in her 50s stood, nervous but determined. Ma'am, you can't just... the bailiff started. I'm Valerie Henderson, she said. Richard did the same thing to my mother in Bend. I have documentation. The courtroom erupted. Judge Morgan gavelled for order. Ma'am, this is highly irregular. Your Honor, Samuel interjected quickly. This witness has evidence directly relevant to Mr. Heir's pattern of behavior and credibility. The judge considered. I'll allow it. Ms. Henderson, please come forward. Valerie's testimony was damning. Richard had married her mother, convinced her to renovate her historic home, maxed out her credit, then tried to force a sale. When her mother died of a stroke during the legal battle, Richard disappeared with $30,000. I tried to warn Patricia, Valerie said, looking at my mother. I called her church, but Richard intercepted, told them I was his unstable ex-stepdaughter. Mom's face went white. Richard's turn to testify was a disaster. Every lie he told. Samuel had documentation to disprove. The successful business, bankruptcy records, the safety improvements, historical society condemnation, the unstable stepdaughter, my employment records, community service awards, glowing references. Mr. Heir, Judge Morgan finally asked, did you or did you not remove and sell copper pipes after the court injunction? There was a misunderstanding about the dates. It's a yes or no question. Richard's mouth worked. Yes. Did you use Mrs. Heir's credit cards to fund your renovations without her knowledge? She gave me permission. Mrs. Heir? The judge turned to Mom. Did you authorize Mr. Heir to take out loans in your name? The courtroom held its breath. Mom looked at Richard, then at me, then at the judge. No, she whispered. I didn't. Richard exploded. Patricia, what are you? Mr. Heir, control yourself or I'll have you removed. Connor jumped up. This is bullshit. We improved that dump. Sit down, Mr. Heir, or join your father in contempt. Sophie was frantically deleting videos from her phone, realizing the legal implications of her documentation. Judge Morgan reviewed her notes. I've heard enough. Mr. Heir, you've presented no legitimate claim to the property. You've destroyed historical elements worth far more than your alleged improvements. You've violated a court order. You've potentially committed fraud. She turned to me. Ms. Carter, the property is yours, unencumbered. Mr. Heir, Mrs. Heir, and their family have 30 days to vacate. Furthermore, Mr. Heir is ordered to pay restitution of $70,000 for the destroyed stained glass window. $70,000? Richard went pale. I don't have... Then I suggest you find it. Additionally, I'm referring this case to the district attorney for potential fraud charges." She banged her gavel. Court dismissed. The gavel's echo hadn't faded when Richard lunged toward me, his face twisted with rage. "You little bitch! You've ruined everything!" The bailiff intercepted him before he got close, but his fury filled the courtroom. 70,000? I'll see you dead before— "Mr. Hale," Judge Morgan's voice cracked like a whip. "One more word and you'll be held in contempt. Bailiff, escort him out." As Richard was forcibly removed, still shouting threats, Connor pointed at me. "This isn't over. You have no idea who you're messing with." "Actually," the district attorney's representative spoke up from the back, "she's messing with someone who's about to face fraud charges. I suggest you both leave quietly." Sophie was already gone, probably racing to delete every incriminating post before prosecutors could screenshot them. The courtroom gradually emptied, leaving just Mom, Samuel, and me. Mom stood frozen, tears streaming. "What have I done? Maddie, what have I done?" Part of me wanted to comfort her, part wanted to scream, "I told you so." Instead, I just felt empty. "Mrs. Hale," Samuel said gently, "you should know that testifying truthfully today may have saved you from conspiracy charges, but you need your own lawyer now. Richard will try to take you down with him." She nodded numbly, then looked at me. "The house, all of Dad's work. I'm so sorry." "It can be restored," I said quietly. "Most of it, anyway. I mean, I'm sorry for choosing him over you, for not seeing, for not listening." She reached for my hand, hesitated. "Can you ever forgive me?" "I don't know, Mom. I honestly don't know." She left, shoulders shaking. Samuel patted my arm. "You did it, Maddie. Your grandfather would be proud." Outside, the Historical Society members cheered when I emerged. Janet Reeves from the Tribune was there, recorder ready. "Ms. Carter, how does it feel to win?" I looked back at the courthouse. It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like surviving. The next 3 days were surreal. Richard and his children cleared out in the middle of the night, taking whatever they could carry. They left destruction in their wake. Holes punched in walls, toilets clogged with concrete, obscenities spray-painted on Grandpa's workshop walls. But they also left in fear. The DA had frozen Richard's accounts pending investigation. Connor was being investigated for selling stolen property. Turns out some of Grandpa's tools he'd sold were worth thousands to collectors. Sophie faced charges for cyber harassment and defamation. Mom moved into a friend's spare room. The reverse mortgage Richard had started was voided. Fraud invalidated the documents, but her credit was destroyed, her savings gone. She looked 10 years older when she came to sign papers releasing any claim to the house. "I was so stupid," she kept saying. "How could I be so stupid?" He was a professional manipulator, Mom. He knew exactly which buttons to push. "Your father would be so disappointed in me. And Dad?" She touched the painted doorframe. "I helped destroy his life's work." "We'll restore it," I said. "I've already contacted restoration specialists." "With what money? I know you spent everything on the legal fight." She was right. I was broke. The house was mine. But I couldn't afford to fix it or even pay the property taxes coming due. The GoFundMe had helped with legal fees, but restoration would cost hundreds of thousands. Then the article came out. Janet Reeves had done a deep dive into Richard's history. 5 previous wives, all widows, all left bankrupt. The story went viral. The Casanova con artist, how one man destroyed historic homes and lives. The response was overwhelming. Preservation groups from across the country reached out. A crowdfunding campaign raised $50,000 in a week. The National Trust for Historic Preservation offered a grant. PBS wanted to document the restoration for a series on American craftsmanship. But the biggest surprise came from Valerie Henderson. She arrived with a cashier's check for $30,000. "I can't take this," I protested. "It's not mine," she said. "It's what Richard stole from my mother. The police recovered it from one of his accounts. Mom would want it to go toward restoring what he destroyed." Master craftsmen began volunteering their time. The artist who'd created similar stained glass offered to recreate the windows at cost. A local woodworker who'd trained under Grandpa came to rebuild the bookshelf from photos, refusing payment. Henry taught me everything. This is how I repay him. Mom came by sometimes, watching the restoration from the sidewalk, never coming in. One day I found her in the garden, planting bulbs where Grandpa's flowers had been. "I know I have no right to be here," she said. "It's okay, Mom." "Is it? Is anything ever going to be okay between us?" I knelt beside her, pushing bulbs into the dark soil. "I don't know, but Grandpa always said gardens take time. Maybe we do too." 3 months later, Richard pled guilty to fraud to avoid trial. 5 years in prison, restitution to all his victims, money he didn't have. Connor got probation and community service. Sophie disappeared entirely. Her influencer career destroyed when brands dropped her after the scandal. The house slowly came back to life. Not exactly as it was. Some things couldn't be replaced, but the new stained glass caught light like prayers. The rebuilt bookshelf stood proud and strong. The doorframe couldn't be unmarked, but I carefully recarved each height, each year, from memory and old photos. Standing in Grandpa's workshop, now cleaned and restored, I could almost hear his voice. "See, Maddie? Sometimes things have to break before you understand how to truly fix them." He wasn't just talking about wood. A year later, I stood in the restored parlor, sunlight streaming through the new stained glass windows, casting familiar wildflower patterns across the polished wood floor. The PBS crew was packing up after filming the final episode of Restored: The Carter Craftsman Story. The house had become something of a pilgrimage site for preservation enthusiasts, though I limited tours to maintain my privacy. Mom and I had found our way to a tentative peace. She never moved back in. That bridge was too damaged to fully rebuild, but she came for Sunday dinners, helped tend Grandpa's garden, and slowly, carefully, we were constructing something new between us, not the relationship we'd had before, but perhaps something more honest. "I got a letter from Richard," she told me one evening, sitting in the kitchen where those height marks still lined the doorframe. My body tensed. "From prison?" "He wanted money. Said I owed him for the emotional support he'd provided." She laughed, but it was bitter. I sent the letter to the DA instead. "Good for you, Mom." She traced the wood grain of the table, one of the few original pieces that survived intact. "I still have nightmares sometimes, about how easily I believed him, how quickly I turned against you. He was good at what he did, a professional. Stop making excuses for me. Maddie, I need to own this." She met my eyes. "I chose him over you, over Dad's legacy, over everything that mattered. That's on me. And you chose to tell the truth when it counted. That's on you too." We sat in comfortable silence, the kind we hadn't shared in years. The house creaked gently around us, settling into evening, alive again with purpose and memory. The workshop had become my favorite place. I'd started taking woodworking classes, finally learning the skills Grandpa had tried to teach me. My first project, a simple box, sat on his workbench, crooked and rough and mine. "You're trying too hard." Marcus, the master craftsman who'd volunteered to teach me, said during one lesson, "Wood wants to become something. Your job is to listen, not force. Just like with Mom, just like with the house, just like with healing." The financial pressure had eased thanks to the documentary and donations, but I'd made a decision that surprised everyone. I kept my apartment in Portland and only lived in the house on weekends. It needed to be more than just my private sanctuary. I turned it into the Carter Center for Traditional Crafts, offering workshops and apprenticeships to young people interested in preservation trades. "Grandpa would love this," Mom said when I showed her the first class of students learning joinery in his workshop. All these young hands learning old skills. Valerie Henderson visited occasionally, bringing her teenage daughter who was fascinated by the restoration process. "You gave my mom justice, even after she was gone," Valerie said. "That means everything." Sophie resurfaced once, sending an Instagram message. "I'm sorry. I was just following my dad's lead. I know that's no excuse." I didn't respond. But I didn't block her either. Some bridges weren't worth rebuilding, but I'd learned not to burn them completely either. Connor never apologized. Last I heard, he was working construction in Idaho, telling anyone who'd listen about the inheritance he'd been cheated out of. Richard would serve 3 more years, though his lawyer kept filing appeals that went nowhere. On the first anniversary of the court victory, I found Mom in the garden at dawn, kneeling by Grandpa's grave marker. We'd had him reinterred on the property after getting special permission from the city. "I told him everything," she said without looking up. "About Richard, the house, the trial, about how you fought when I couldn't, about how you saved his legacy when I nearly destroyed it." "Mom." "He would have been so disappointed in me, but so proud of you." She stood, brushing dirt from her knees. "I'm proud of you too. Maddie, I know I have no right to be, but I am." "You have every right. You're my mother." "I wasn't a very good one." "You're learning to be better. That counts." That evening, as the last sunlight filtered through those salvaged and restored windows, I sat in Grandpa's chair with his journal, reading his notes about the house, about craftsmanship, about legacy. One entry, written just months before he died, stopped me cold. "Maddie will face tests I can't imagine. The house will be her battlefield, but not for the reasons she thinks. It's not about preserving wood and glass. It's about learning that sometimes things must break completely before they can be rebuilt stronger. She has the hands for it. More importantly, she has the heart." I closed the journal and looked around the room. Damaged, restored, different, but somehow more itself than before. Through the window, I could see Mom working in the garden, planting something new beside something old. "I kept my promise, Grandpa," I whispered to the empty room that wasn't empty at all, filled as it was with memory and purpose and the quiet satisfaction of hard-won peace. The house stood strong around me, every beam and board a testament to the power of fighting for what matters, even when, especially when, the whole world tells you to let it go. In the workshop, my crooked little box sat next to Grandpa's perfect ones, and somehow, that felt exactly right. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in my situation? Your experiences and perspectives mean everything to this community we're building together.